I unboxed it and it was a little baby, opened that. I was like in love. That's my favorite reptile, hands down. I have 5 right now. I actually had 6. I had a weird situation where I'm trying to breed them. So I won't name any names, but somebody recommended this guy who sells like adult frilled dragons. So I bought one from him thinking it was going to be a great situation. I got the frilled dragon. He said this frilled dragon male was only 2 years old. I could tell looking at this. It looked like it's been through war. Its tail was all bent, missing fingers. Its jaw was crooked, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this.
I think the frilled dragon is probably one of the more familiar species that the non-reptile keeping public would actually recognize. I mean, there's something so distinctive about that frilled neck when they're defensive or aggressive that most people recognize. It's kind of like the hood of a cobra. Almost everybody knows that as a cobra, even though they don't know the species. I think frilled dragons are similar. It's probably mostly due to Jurassic Park, the very first Jurassic Park. Maybe someone in the comments can let me know what species of dinosaur that was. But for whatever reason, that display of aggression is something that is ubiquitously understood by people who even don't know anything about reptiles. Today, I'm joined by Tommy Maxwell of Tommy's Reptiles. He does keep a colony of frilled dragons, so of course we discuss that. We also discuss his couple of cohab setups between turtles and fish and some of the trouble he's got into showing those online. We discuss the Chinese water dragon that he has, and that is not a relatively non-remarkable species for most people, but I feel like it's one of those species that does the hobby a lot of damage, and we talk about that later on in the episode. And we discuss him getting very popular on Instagram and TikTok, mainly due to the frilled dragon. So all in all, it's a very fascinating conversation. We cover quite a lot of different topics here. We also discuss his experience in the Navy, which for me was nothing reptile related, but I was fascinated by that as well. Let's jump into the episode. Enjoy. This podcast is all about improving your reptile husbandry. However, I know not everybody has the time or the money to go out and spend thousands of dollars doing custom builds. Thankfully, friend of the podcast, Josh Halter, aka the Bio Dude, is working hard to make better care more accessible. He makes turnkey bioactive kits for leopard geckos, ball pythons, tortoises, invertebrates, dart frogs, and the list continues to grow. He has spent years testing and perfecting these handcrafted substrates and dietary supplements to create the most effective products. If you visit thebiodude.com, you will see he is a proud supporter of both USARK and responsible reptile keeping, and there is an option to donate to either at checkout. Well, Tommy, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I've been watching your podcast for quite some time, so it's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's great. I love seeing your reels and shorts, and you've had a few things kind of take off and go viral because you have quite an interesting collection, and I think it gravitates towards people who maybe don't know anything about reptiles. They see some of the species you keep, and they're like, what the hell is that? I would love to talk about, to start with something that's sort of not reptile related, is your experience in the Navy. You posted, I think it was not that long ago, maybe it was the Navy's birthday or something, and you kind of posted a compilation of just different things. So I'd love to hear more about that. And I know it's not reptile related for those who are wanting to jump right into reptiles, but I'm sure it's linked at some point. Tell me about that experience.
All right. So I went to college, got through college, and I always wanted to join the military since I was a little kid, just watching like Arnold Schwarzenegger movies and stuff. So I wanted to join the Marines originally, and I went down to the recruiting office with one of my buddies, and I don't know what happened with the Marines, but he's like, hey, come down to the Navy recruiting office. And I was like, the Navy, what's that all about? I don't want to be on a boat all the time. He's like, just come down, and we'll talk to the recruiter, and we'll see what they say. I went down there with my friend, and the recruiter's like, what job would you be interested in the Navy? I was like, I don't know, a cook or something. I don't know. My friend grabbed me. And he's like, you can't do that, man. I was like, what do you mean? I was like, this is the Navy. They probably don't shoot guns or anything, And he's like, dude, you got to do spec ops or special warfare. And I was like, what's that? And then the recruiter's like, well, we have 2 spec ops special warfare jobs available for you to try out for. One was the Navy SEALs, and the other one was called Air Rescue. And I was like, Air Rescue, what's that? And he's like, you just fly around in helicopters, shoot machine guns, and you jump out of it sometimes. And I knew what Navy SEALs did, and I didn't want to necessarily go that extreme. So I was like, Air Rescue, I'll look into that. And I went home and did some research. I was like, oh, that looks super cool. So I joined in 2010, went through the 2-year pipeline to become, it's called an aviation rescue swimmer, but it's essentially like a helicopter crewman. So anything from using the machine gun, crew-served weapons, a rescue swimmer. So you do search and rescue on land or in the water. And then we have other sensors on the helicopter, so we operate like radar and sonar and stuff like that. So I did that for 10 years. It was super fun, and I really liked flying helicopters the first few years. It was like an adrenaline rush. I loved it. And then the last couple of years I was in, I started to get like freaked out, and I was like, 10 years is good enough for me. So I got out.
So did basically the same stimulus made you more scared eventually? Like you kind of, is it one of those things where you start to realize kind of how dangerous the environment is, and then you realize like, okay, this is maybe not as safe as I thought when I was 19?
Well, I think that I don't know what it's called. The frontal male's frontal cortex, is that what it's called? Something like that. I don't think mine was fully developed yet. So in the beginning, I was kind of just like a dope. I was like, this is awesome. I can hang my legs out. I love jumping out and stuff. And then I think my brain slowly developed. I'm like, oh, you could actually, crash and die anytime. And I've had some close calls, by the way, in the helicopter. So I think like just that having those pile on each other, every time I would get a little more freaked out. And then it started to get to the point where it wasn't so fun anymore. So I was just like, all right. Originally, I was just going to do 6, and then I re-upped for another 4, so I did 10. But after that, I was like, all right, I don't think I can do another 10,
Yeah. As someone who has a swimming background, when I watch people jump out of helicopters into like choppy ocean, it just gives me shivers. I'm like, that just seems so dangerous. I mean, obviously, you're doing it for a good reason. You're trying to rescue somebody if that's the scenario, but it still seems so sketchy.
Yeah, at first when I was looking into it and stuff, I was like, I wonder how high they jump you out. Like, is it like 40, 50 feet? And then the lowest they're supposed to drop you out is only 15 feet above the water. So I'm sure you've jumped off stuff way higher than that. The only thing that I would get sketched out on was we would do jumps in this river called the St. Johns River in Jacksonville, Florida. And it has both alligators and bull sharks in it. And then you have to go in the water at night. And then, you'll get out of the hell. They actually kind of lower you in off the cable. You disconnect and you do some stuff. And then sometimes the helicopter will do a couple laps. And I would just be there in the dark with my little glow stick on my mask. And I'd be like, I'm not going to move. I know there's alligators and bull sharks in here. And no one's ever been attacked, but it's still in the back of my head,
Oh, when I swim in a lake that I know has absolutely nothing in it, I convince myself that there's probably a bull shark in there.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's a murky water. There's always something under there. So when you went to college, were you focused, because now you have this animal channel and you're focusing on reptile keeping. Did you want to have a career that was animal focused in some capacity, or were you always more like public servant type thing?
It was kind of a weird thing. So like growing up, I just gravitated towards probably like you. I actually want to ask you after this, like how you got into reptiles and stuff. But when I was a little kid, I don't know if it's the combination of like my mom showing me The Land Before Time, Ninja Turtles just got big, and I would just go out looking for frogs, and then all of that just kept like triggering my brain. So then growing up, I would watch all the nature documentaries. And then obviously, like everyone knows, Steve Irwin came out. I don't know how old I was, maybe like 10 or something. So I was like, oh, somebody who, is all about this stuff. And I would say like, I didn't even know what I wanted to do. I would have probably preferred to do reptile related stuff in general. I never really planned to have a TikTok or YouTube or anything. When I got out of the Navy, I started getting back on the reptiles because I couldn't really have any pets, while I was in. And so I started getting turtles and stuff. And my wife started noticing me always taking pictures and videos of them just for my own personal, satisfaction. So I can go back in a couple of years and be like, oh, I can't believe this turtle is that small. And she's like, make a TikTok. And I was like, what is that? And then and so I looked on. That's kind of right when TikTok came out. I didn't really know much about it. And then I was just scrolling through the TikTok app, and all the videos I thought were pretty cheesy and dumb, to be honest. So I was like, well, maybe I'll try to make cheesy, dumb reptile videos. And that's where it all started. And then at the same time, before that, I was watching YouTube for a long time, like, Camp Cannon. I ran into your channel before I even, talked to you years before that. Watch your channel, and then I just love the idea of like, I was like, maybe one day I can have a channel and do the stuff that these guys do, because that's what I like to do anyway. And so I just kind of do it for fun,
Yeah.
But that's how I got into it. But I did always want to serve in the military, but I didn't want to make it a full career. I originally just wanted to do the 6 years, get out, and then do something that I like enjoy with reptiles, if possible. So that's kind of why I work at the police department now. It's just a steady job while I really dive into my hobby and stuff like that.
Yeah. Now, did you keep reptiles as pets before the Navy, like when you were a kid at home?
Oh yeah. So my mom started bringing me looking for frogs and turtles. Maybe when I was like 4 or something with my friend, and then I realized. How old are you, by the way?
I'm 32. We must be
Okay,
close.
I'm 30. I'm 38. So there's
Okay.
this movie. There's this movie. I don't know. You might not have ever heard of it. It's like a B movie, but you should watch it just for fun. But it's called Frog, and it's a movie that takes place. It's like in the mid early '80s or whatever. And my mom, I would go to the video store when they had VHS tapes, and I saw the covers, just like this kid, nerdy kid with glasses, and there's like a frog on the cover, and I would rent it, put it in in the movie, he just walks through. He walks through his garage, and it's a reptile room. It looks just like your setup behind you, but it's in a garage, and obviously it's in the '80s, so they just have fish tanks, not like elaborate setups. And that must have triggered my brain too. So right after I saw Frog, I saw that movie when I was like 4 or 5. I'd be every day, Mom, could I get this? Could I get that? And they'd be absolutely not. And I'd just be, chirping in their ear every day, all day. And then somehow I convinced them to get me an iguana when I was 7. So that was my first reptile. And 7-year-old taking care of an iguana, obviously wasn't. My mom ended up taking care of it, but it wasn't the best idea.
Yeah, it's funny when you look at the 90s how popular iguanas became as pets. I was just looking at some numbers just not that long ago. I should have pulled them up, but it's just like hundreds of thousands of iguanas being pumped out as the good pet for and now I just think about like a male mature iguana is probably the exact opposite of a good pet for almost everybody.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, like, I feel so. I don't know if shame's the right word because I didn't know what I was doing. I was 7, and my parents did the best they could. But if I'll show you a picture after this, but there's a picture of me in front of its enclosure. It's like I don't know, 20 or 40 gallon long fish tank. It has like a mat, one little stick in it, and it definitely doesn't even have UVB. It just had a heat light on it. Somehow this iguana thrived. I mean, it grew. I don't know, well, it didn't thrive, but it grew pretty quick. Ended up, I think, being a female. At the time, I thought it was a male. But my parents just got so fed up with taking care of it, they just gave it to a local pet shop, and they kind of took it in and kept it on display for a while. But I don't know what ended up happening to her. But yeah, they told my parents to feed it monkey food, the iguana monkey food. They like everything was wrong with it. It was a disaster. The reptile game has come a long way since then.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what it's kind of nice to come back to it. You come back to it in the 2020s after you leave the Navy, and there's quite a bit of advancement. There's way more information. Was there something that you initially gravitated towards? Like, was it just the turtles initially, or?
Well, it's funny you said that because I always think about that because right before I joined the Navy, I kind of what did I have before that? When I was in college, I actually had an iguana that I got because I kind of wanted to redeem myself. So I had this iguana for a long time. Built her a big wooden enclosure. Looked like crap, but it was big enough for her, and made all these climbs and stuff. But yeah, so fish tanks were kind of still before I joined. Were kind of still the it thing. They just started maybe making those exoterras and stuff, but I didn't really see much of. I wasn't going on social media at this time, or I didn't know if there was like videos about like bioactive enclosures, more naturalistic setups. So before I joined, it was still kind of the basic concept of like the '90s keeping, and then I joined the Navy. I still would like always catch reptiles, look at them and stuff. Never really paid attention to reptile keepers or anything. And then when I got out, I was like, the game has changed. I saw like, Kennan's cool outdoor enclosures, your awesome indoor enclosures. I was like, I had no idea this was even possible. Like to make the realistic rock backgrounds, putting all like actual branches in there, making it like, making it good for the animal, not just for me to have it in a little fish tank and just like stare at it all the time.
Yeah.
But, when I got out, it was a weird story how I got back into it. I always loved them. I always kind of knew I was going to get more. But one day, do you guys have Trader Joe's up there?
No, but I'm familiar. Yeah.
All right, my wife and I went to Trader Joe's, and the Trader Joe's where we were at the time, and I was actually still in the Navy, but I knew I wasn't going to deploy anymore, so I knew I was going to get out, so I could get pets because I didn't have to do anything anymore. So we were at Trader Joe's, and it was just filled with these crazy women with shopping, like just a zoo of women with shopping carts, like almost bumping into me. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm going to freaking have a panic attack in here. I was like, I can't stand in here anymore. And there's like a PetSmart right next to it. She's like, just go into PetSmart and just, I'll meet you. I'll call you when I'm done shopping. I was like, all right. I went into PetSmart and I was just like looking at the fish section. And I was like, I always like fish too, but not as much as reptiles. I was like, I'm just going to get a fish tank. Why not? So I got like a little tiny 5-gallon fish tank. brought it home, set it up, did everything. I did watch some YouTube videos, figured out what I needed to do, went and got the fish later on or whatever. And then I was sitting there and I was like, I feel like this is missing something. I was like, I wonder if I could turn this into like a little turtle fish tank and get like a basking area. Went on YouTube. I can't remember what channel. Is this some guy's channel who showed you how to make a turtle basking area out of another fish tank you stack on top of it? So I did that. I was super proud of it. And, you know, the turtle at the time was like the size of a quarter. And then it started to grow. I was like, well, let me do this again with a 55-gallon fish tank and then get a bigger, 10-gallon tank for his basking area. And that's what sparked it. And then got back into lizard snakes and everything else,
Yeah, that's awesome. And are you in Florida, or where do you live?
South Florida. Yep.
South Florida. Okay, so then keep it outside.
Yep.
That all works out for you.
All the way down here. Oh, actually, I had a frilled dragon outside, and it started to get a little cold. I got to do more research before I could definitely keep them outside year round. I know they can withstand some cold temps, but I need to be sure before I leave them out there year round.
Yeah. So you started getting into the turtles and the fish, and I want to talk about those setups as well, because I think that is a pretty fascinating cohab for people to tackle, and it's a pretty interesting setup. But maybe we'll jump to the frilled dragons first, because that is a species that probably, I don't know if maybe you would agree or not, is probably one of the reasons why your social media has blown up to its extent, because they're such a fascinating animal and they're personable, and they have such a bizarre defense that people find them interesting to look at. So what brought you into frilled dragons? The best part about providing high-quality reptile husbandry is you get to develop a long-term relationship with your animal. Meet Jackson, my 18-year-old crested gecko. Jackson lives on the Biodude's Terrafauna substrate, which is one of their substrates that's specifically designed for warm biomes and humidity spikes. Like all other Biodude substrates, it contains organic content to help support the plant life in Jackson's vivarium. It also holds moisture very well, which means humidity is never an issue, even in my dry climate. Another favorite of mine is the Biodude's Bug Grub. This is a supplement powder made from natural ingredients like carrots, beets, spirulina, oats, and potatoes. Everybody knows how important gut-loading feeder insects is, and this simplifies it for me and allows me to be confident when I feed both Jackson and my tarantulas that they're getting the nutrients they need to thrive. Also, if you have a lot of babies right now, this is a great way to help fortify the diets of neonatal reptiles. The Biodude has a ton of great educational content on both his YouTube channel and the website, all about bioactive care, and it's just one of those brands that's doing their part to push herpetoculture into a positive direction and give reptile keeping a better name.
It all comes back to iguanas. So originally I'm from Connecticut, and you can own, I don't know what reptiles you could own there or whatever, but in Florida, so I'm from Connecticut. They didn't really have strict reptile rules. Joined the Navy, moved to Florida, then moved to Virginia, where I got the fish tank. And then my wife is from South Florida, so we're going to move back down to South Florida. And in my head, I'm like, this is perfect. I can keep reptiles outside. It's like a win-win for everyone. So we were getting ready to move down there, and I was like, okay, we're going to move down to South Florida. I got to find a reptile that I can keep outdoors all year round. And at the time, you were allowed to keep iguanas, regular green iguanas, which I have, I love them, So I don't know how to pronounce this word, axanthic, the blue ones.
Yes, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, so I was like, all right, when we get down there, we settle in, I'm going to get a baby axanthic iguana, raise it in like a indoor enclosure, and then build it a big outdoor enclosure, a huge one. I wanted it to be like 16 feet long, 8 feet high, maybe 10 feet wide, something like that. And then right when we moved down here, they made the law that you can't keep iguanas legally anymore. And they were going around like taking people's, tegus, green iguanas, and various snakes and stuff. So I was like devastated. I was like, well, that was one of my favorite lizards, I was like, what should I do now? And then I just went down a rabbit hole, looking on my phone, and I always knew what frilled dragons was. I love them. Like, have you seen Rescuers Down Under?
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yeah,
so when I was little, that was
Classic.
my favorite little lizard in that movie. What's his name in that movie? Frank or something like that. So I loved him in that movie. And then I didn't even realize you could have him as a pet. And then I found out that you could. So I did a lot of research before I got one. But I was like, these things are incredible. I can't believe that, like, don't get me wrong, I have nothing against bearded dragons. I've had them before. I like them. I just was like, I couldn't believe that more people don't even have these or know about them or care about them. And I was like, I'm going to give it a shot. So I did a lot of research. I got like a medium Exoterra. I found a good breeder from California, paid for it. He shipped it out. And then once I unboxed it, and it was a little baby, opened that. I was like, in love. That now that's my favorite reptile, hands down. Yeah, I'm obsessed with them. You know,
And how
I
many
can't
do you
get
have
enough of
now?
them. I have five right. I have five right now. I actually had six. I had a weird situation where I'm trying to breed them. So I won't name any names, but somebody recommended this guy who sells like adult frilled dragons. So I bought one from him, thinking it was going to be a great situation. I got the frilled dragon. He said this frilled dragon male was only 2 years old. I could tell looking at this. It looked like it's been through war. Its tail was all bent, missing fingers. Its jaw was crooked, and I was like, "Oh my god, I can't believe this." And I was like, "Well, I want to give it the best life I can while he's in my care." So I didn't even bother mixing him with any other ones. I got one of those big grow tents, made him a big enclosure, and he ended up dying. I had him for like maybe 2 years, and then he ended up dying. And I think it was old age. I think the guy tricked me and said it was 2 years old, but I think that frilled dragon looked way older than my frilled dragon that I've had for like 6 years or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Another classic reptile story.
yeah,
Being ripped off by somebody. So
Yeah.
how do you keep them right now? Because you have five. Are they cohabbed at all? Are they all separate until breeding, or?
So I was a little scared about cohabbing them. So I'll say I don't know if you can see it behind me, but behind me right here is one frilled dragon enclosure. It's only like I think it's like 4 feet. It's not big enough. I want to make everything bigger. But it's like 4 feet high, 3.5 feet wide, and 2 feet deep. But I have one in there, and then I have another male. So I have two adult males. One is in there by himself, and then the other one is in there with three females. And so I wanted to test the waters, so I put the three females with the males, and I sat in here the whole weekend, making sure that nothing crazy happened, and they get along perfectly fine. And I read that I saw on a YouTube video some guy showing he was in Australia. He put his male in with a bunch of females, and they get along fine. But you can't put two males together. And I've just brought them next to each other, and they wanted to kill each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, the goal for these guys is I would eventually want to empty these enclosures out, put maybe a smaller species of lizard or something in there. I eventually want all my frilled dragons to be outside year round. So I'm probably going to build like 3 big outdoor enclosures so I can keep a male in each one, and then like a little group of females in each one too.
How cool of temperatures do you think they can withstand? Obviously, you're not willing to test this out on them, but like you said, you're doing the research. So is there a number that you think they need to stay above?
Well, there's this guy. I don't know if you've heard of him yet, but he posts excellent footage of frilled dragons in the wild. His Instagram is like DW Shine. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
No.
But somebody sent me him and said, check out this guy. He works outside doing. I forgot what he does, but every time he's at work, he walks by the trees and you see him in the trees. And I messaged him. I'm like, hey, do you mind telling me what the lowest temp in the coldest season, part of the season it gets there, and the highest temp? So he sent me those temperatures, and you know how America we do Fahrenheit. So he sent me and your guys' wacky wacky scale Celsius. Yeah. But I on one of my books it said like 60 or so. I don't trust this book though. It's like a book that was written a long time ago, and I don't trust a lot of those reptile books that I have because I found them to have BS information. So unless I hear it from somebody who lives in the same area as them, how cold it gets. So if he said it gets 50 in the winter, then I'll keep them outside year round. I gotta go back to that text and do the math. But they can withstand cooler temperatures than I thought originally, because in one of those books it said that they must have a basking spot of 125 degrees and their ambient temperature has to be like 95. I'm like, that sounds a little crazy. And I just went on my phone and typed in like one of the territories they're from. And I saw there was like at nighttime, it was like, 69, 70. And the daytime, it gets up to like, 100 something. But of course, rocks heat up and could get up to like 115, 120. But
yeah,
I didn't want to. I'd rather make it a little cooler for them than burn their skin off, especially in like a little smaller enclosure like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you're dealing with a small enclosure, then it's better to have a much more mild, warm spot. And so what's the coldest temperature you will have outside during the winter? Like, let's say the January, whatever. Are you getting down? You're not getting into the 30s, or?
Since I've been here, it has in the past, but since I've been here, I want to say the coldest I remember it being. I've only been in this part of South Florida for like, I think 3 or 4 years, and I don't recall it getting colder than mid 40s, low 50s. I don't think it gets colder than that. But I mean, I'm always going to have a backup option. Like I'm going to have some stuff in my garage just in case there's a cold spell, so I could bring my animals inside, keep them in there for a couple of days. But it's only really cold here for like 3 weeks, which is funny, and it's not really that cold, especially in that compared to what you're used to.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that I was in South Florida about a year ago now, and the thing that blew my mind is the humidity. I talk about this all the time on the podcast because, it can get humid where I live. It can be easily 80, 85 even in the summer, 90 humidity. And that's humid, but it's nothing like Florida humid, because Florida humid is just wet. Like when I was in Fort Lauderdale, like everything was wet. It's like the walls were wet. It was just like everything. It's crazy. So are they a species that can handle that humidity? I imagine that in Australia it's a little bit drier. Like, do you worry about that or?
Well, I do worry about that. So that's why it was kind of a test phase. So I left this enclosure open, and just in case he didn't take well to, it's kind of like a little feeler thing, just to, because I knew he could withstand the heat. I knew he could withstand heat out here. So it was a test phase. So I built this outdoor enclosure. I kept him in there, and I checked on him multiple times a day, and he seemed to be thriving with that. With the high humidity, it rains like every day, and then just gets super hot, causes more humidity, and then rains again. And he was doing great because he had, out of all my frilled dragons I've ever had, he's the only one who's had stuck shed problems. And right when I put him out there, it started to just fix it right off the bat. So because some people were telling me that stuck shed could be from being too dry, and other people say it's from being too wet. I don't know, but when I put him outside, I don't know if it's the natural sunlight helps the skin or what it is, but it really healed his stuck shed, because he was having a lot of issues with that. And it's weird because I keep him and the other ones in the same exact temperature, same exact humidity. I spray their enclosures the same exact amount of times a day, and the other four have zero issues with that.
Interesting. So something outside clicked for him, whether it's even just nutrients, whatever, eating wild prey.
Yep.
Or so did the behavior change when you brought him outside? I guess maybe first start with how personable how personable are they? Are they quite tame, or are they fairly timid of you as a keeper?
This is something that I learned over a couple of years. So how you said frilled dragons are probably what my channel is best known for.
Yeah.
And it's only because of a couple videos of when I bring them outside. So when they're inside, I could reach in, I can grab their water bowl, I can feed them, I could pet them on the head. They don't care. They feel safe because they could see the ceiling above them. And I think that's why. I think because they don't expect birds to swoop down. And then when I bring them outside, they totally flip a switch, and they act completely different. And then right when I bring them inside, let them settle down for 30 seconds, they calm down again. So I think that the big behavior change outside, that's why they don't ever really frill inside, barely ever. Outside, I would say 3 out of the 5 will. And it's just because I think they know that things could come from above, and maybe they don't look at me the same because when I'm in here, maybe I look different, or I'm casting big shadows outside. So and plus usually when I'm in here, I'm on my knees, kind of like opening their stuff. When I'm outside, I'm usually standing up, so I probably look different to them, and I think that's probably why they frill up.
Yeah. Now, what about diet? How are you feeding them? How often? What are you feeding them?
So I like to swap it up. I like to switch out what they eat as often as possible. So like I go to the pet shop a couple times a week. I really like them to eat dusted calcium and vitamin dusted crickets a couple times a week. And the pet shop they run out of crickets sometimes, but they always have super worms. I'm not a fan of those, but I do feed them crickets, super worms, hornworms, wax worms, and then you know how you can get the crickets in a can.
Yeah.
Do you guys have those up there?
Yep. Yeah.
So I get the crickets in a can and cockroaches in a can. I think they're like I don't know what kind of cockroaches they are, but I read that those are good for them. And I just try to swap it up and give them a variety of different types of nutrients. And then I dust their stuff like once or twice a week minimum. And then once in a while for the bigger, so for the males, and when the female gets bigger, I will give them a mouse maybe once a month to give them a big protein boost. And I do try to give them some veggies, but it's not like a routine thing that I do every week. It's like kind of like a special treat. But yeah. and I feed them. I usually feed them every other day, but if I notice that they're getting way too plump, then I try to just feed them a little less or whatever. I just want to make sure they're not. I don't really see their ribs, but I also want to make sure that they're not overweight. So I kind of
Yeah.
just eyeball it sometimes.
Yeah,
But
that
they're
makes
always
sense.
like they'll eat all like they're always hungry, so I got to be careful. And you know how they're your pets, so you always want to you always want to give your dog a treat every time they're hungry. I just want to keep feeding them, so
Yeah.
I try to control that because in the beginning one of mine got real chubby.
Yeah, it's definitely easy to make reptiles chunky, especially because I always say it's one of the few times you get to interact with the animal, so it kind of
Yeah.
becomes addicting. How large do they get as a full grown adult?
So so they say that the biggest frilled dragon is the Australian frilled dragon, and I believe they all originate from Australia, but some ended up in New Guinea and Indonesia. But 3 feet is the max length of a male. I'm sure some of them could get a little longer than that, especially in the pictures and videos I've seen. But that's what it says in the books, and that's just what I read. I have my biggest male is close to 3 feet, but not quite there yet. But yeah, 3 feet is the biggest they can get.
And that's from snout to end of the tail.
Yep.
Yeah, so they're actually fairly small. That's like you said when you're talking about comparing them to a bearded dragon. You're not asked; it's not a much larger animal.
Mm-mm.
And then, as far as their natural behaviors go, are they fairly arboreal? Are they climbing lots? I think so. I assume. So, what sort of things do you see from them?
Yeah, so I'm actually slacking. There's I don't know if you've had him on the channel or know who he is, but this Australian guy, I think his page is like beaches scales or something like that. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Luke,
but
yeah,
yeah, I like his channel, and yeah, I already have seen other people make like the climbs, like the vertical climbs, because right when I got into him, I was like, I'll throw some sticks in there, whatever, and then I saw that you can drill a stick and make it look like a tree. So I want to put like at least 5 in each enclosure, and then when I have the outdoor enclosures, I want to have like 20 of them, so they have different options. But they're super arboreal and spend, I would say, 90% of the time I'm walking in the room and their lights are on. They're on a vertical climb, just hanging out, and then sometimes I'll go up to close to the basking spot, get real heated up, and then once in a while they'll go on the ground, or they'll go on the ground when they see me walking by with food. But other than that, they're always just hanging vertical on a branch.
that's cool. And when you had mentioned that guy a few minutes ago who lives in Australia and sees them in the wild, are they basically doing that as well? Like, are they always on
Yep.
these vertical climbs? Okay.
Yep, and that is the goal. So if I do keeping some frilled dragons inside, so say I finally start breeding them and have some babies or something, I'm gonna take some of that dude's photos and I'm gonna mimic it. I want to make the background look just like that. I want to get similar branches and stumps and stuff, and make the enclosures look just like that. So they have all the because I'm never satisfied with my enclosures. I'm always like I got to do more. I got to do better. So that's the goal for that. But yeah, in his videos and pictures, you just see him. He just reaches around a tree, or he chases them, and they just go up further in the tree. They're always in the trees.
That's really cool. And then, how close do you think you are to a successful clutch and a successful hatch?
I thought I was going to do it this year because Bowie lizard, Bow lizard. Yeah, you know who she is?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so she gives me tips on frilled dragons because she bred them before, and I showed her my female, and I was like, I think it looks like she's gravid, and she's like, oh, she definitely is. I think that you'll get baby. Sometimes it could take 60 days or whatever. So I was super excited because she knows more about breeding them than I do. So I put a lay box in there, and I never saw her lay eggs. I dig through the egg box. Yeah, so definitely none this year. I'm hopefully. So I have 1 adult female and then 2 juvenile females. So I'm hoping within the next 2 years, I'll start having all of them, have a couple clutches each year. I don't want to overdo it, but
Yeah.
if they each laid 2 clutches a year or 1 clutch, I'd be super pumped about that. But I just got to be patient, I guess. I was just worried that if she didn't pass the eggs, that they could break inside of her. So I was kind of paranoid about that, but nothing happened. I don't know if she passed them, they ate them. I have no idea, but yeah, there's no eggs in there.
Yeah. Interesting. And how much can you pick up a new like a neonate for or a young field dragon for?
Depends on the breeder. It depends on what type you're getting. Usually, if you want an Australian baby, they can range from like I want to say like I've seen them as low as $650 to $2,000. An Indonesian one I've seen for $150, and then the New Guinea one is like right in between those. So yeah, it's a big price change from like the different localities.
So are those different species, or are they classified as subspecies, or they're all the same?
Well, I'm trying to figure that out myself because a lot of people like a lot of the people who are into frilled dragons like, oh, it's an Indonesian there, this and that, and I'm just like they're all. I did some research and it said that they all come from the same spot, and then some just went off. The ones that went to I don't know how they got to New Guinea. They just changed a little bit because of the environment. Same with Indonesia. So would that like what would you think that and they like the Indonesian ones are the smallest ones. They got a little smaller. Their colors got a little more drab and a little more like like you've seen the Australian ones with the bright orange and yellow. They kind of lost that. But I in my opinion they're all I like them all the same. I don't. I mean, of course, the Australian ones with the yellow and orange and black look super cool, but would that be the same species to you? You know, like I think it is.
It really depends, right? It probably is. I mean, maybe they have classified them as subspecies, but this is one of those things where it probably needs a genetic analysis, right, to like figure it out.
Yep.
Like you could look at boas in South and Central America; they all look so different, and they're basically all essentially all the exact same species, even though there's a size difference and a crazy color difference, and there's visually they look like two different things. But when you check their DNA, you check under the hood, they're the same thing. So I'm sure that's what's happening with the frilled dragons as well. So are yours all Australian then, or is it a mix?
It's a mix. My original plan was to have a colony of Australians, have a colony of Indonesians in New Guinea, and then once in a while, have a half Indonesian, half Australian. Just mix it up. I don't know if I'm going to do that anymore, but I have one. Let's see, I have one female full Australian. I have two female full Indonesians, and then the male with them is a Indonesian male, and then the one in this enclosure is half Australian, half New Guinea, and then the one that I told you about earlier that passed away was 100% Australian male. So he was going to be, that's why I got the female 100% Australian was to pair with him, but he passed away. But I like personality wise, they're all very similar. Like I don't see any differences. If I say I didn't want to breed them or I wasn't like obsessed with them and I just wanted to get one as a pet, I would probably get an Indonesian just because they are cheaper. They stay smaller. I guess
it's a really neat species, and I like you said, I think there's so many people. We always gravitate towards the bearded dragons and these things, and there's nothing wrong with a bearded dragon, but for people that might want something that's maybe a little more arboreal and has this kind of interesting character about them, it's a really cool option. So hopefully that the outdoor keeping kind of grows, because I think that would be a real easy way to keep them healthy and give them lots of space, and it simplifies it for you too. You're not buying light bulbs and all this. You just put them outside and you're good to go.
Yeah, I was so pumped to build that walk-in enclosure. So my plan is I don't know if you've seen it. I'll send you a picture if you haven't, but it's like, I want to say, how tall is it? It's like 6 feet tall, 4 feet by 4 feet. But I'm thinking that in the future, I'd like to make one that's like, 8 feet tall, wider and longer, and have just like a big breeding population in there, and put a bunch of vertical climbs, maybe some small real trees in there. That'd be really cool. And just be able to walk in there, just like, feel like I'm where they're from almost.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. So let's move on to some of the other projects you have. You do have some turtles outside as well. I was watching your tour video and I saw some of those. But I would love to start with the turtles. There's one behind you, the spotted turtle, and then you have a terrapin as well, diamondback terrapin, and they're both in not similar setups, but they're both kept similar, as a cohab with fish. And I think that is a really cool project for people. Now, maybe we'll start with the one that's just over your shoulder. I know you just finished this, the spotted turtle. I don't really know much about turtle keeping. Is that a full-grown spotted turtle?
No, that's like I would say just becoming a juvenile. They are relatively small. Yeah, they are relatively small. I can't remember how many inches they get full grown, but it's not big at all, especially the males. They stay very small. That's not this is just a juvenile setup. But trying to think of how big the males get. I think 4 or 5 inches, something like that.
Okay. So then as a final, let's say the adult enclosure or the adult tank, the aquarium, how large do you think you'll go for that?
So depending on what sex it is, I don't know what sex this one is yet, but if it is a male, I don't have to go as crazy big, but I would essentially like to get like maybe like a 60 gallon or like 60 gallon, like a long 60 gallon. I kind of like the long panoramic look. And
Yeah, that's
yeah, so
nice.
I'd probably like a 60 gallon for that. They're not really good in deep water, so I'd fill it up like halfway and put a lot more land area in there. And then the terrapin, I want to get like 100 gallon tank for my indoor terrapin because he's a male and he's only like 3.5 inches full grown. So, but they love like the terrapins are love to swim and they're great swimmers. Spotted turtles kind of suck at swimming, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's motoring around pretty good behind you.
Yeah, yeah. Some people were saying, you know, make sure that his feet can touch the ground, his head can go all the way out, or like they said, even make it more shallow than that. I had it like that for a while, and I noticed he was not that bad at swimming, so that's why I got this other enclosure. I want to give him more swimming area, and he can get out whenever he wants. You know, I have a nice little land area that he just chills on all the time.
Yeah. So can you walk us through that build? So the way you've laid out the decor and what you have in there. I see one corridor in there. I'm not sure if there's any other fish.
Yeah, so I got some neon tetras in there, and I don't know if I put them in there too quick or something, but they passed away within like 2 weeks. I had the water cycled, I had everything cycled. I was thinking because this tank has a lot of oak leaves in there. I was thinking that maybe neon tetras are not good with tannins, so I should have looked into that. So before I get more fish for this, I'm going to look into fish that could survive in tannins better than those. But the build was just like you see a lot of YouTube videos. I kind of use the pond spray foam, that method where you just spray foam it, carve it out, and then you put the silicone on top of that, and then the cocoa fiber on top of that. I did that for the top area just for a aesthetic look, and then I left the bottom half without that, and I spray painted the back of the tank black, give it like a dark murky water look, and then I just got some what are those called, pothos in there, and then some other plant I got at Home Depot. I just walked through Home Depot, looked for small little ferns, and then I don't know much about plants, so I just every time I saw one that could fit in the tank, I just Googled, is this reptile safe? Is this animal safe? And then I finally found one after looking for like an hour that said it was. So I got that one. I put it in there. I trimmed it up. I washed it off and stuff because one time I brought a plant home from Home Depot for my monitor enclosure, and there was some kind of insect in there that like bred, and they were all over the enclosure. So I had to take everything out. So now when I bring anything home, I rinse it off thoroughly, check it, and then kind of take it out of the pot and plop it in something else.
Yeah, yeah, I've had the exact same experience with Home Depot plants. So it's best to quarantine or at least do a clean off throughout the soil and whatnot. It just seems to me that like if somebody wants a fairly interactive setup that has more than just one species, a turtle fish cohab is like a perfect solution. Especially that's what I like about the terrapin setup, because I used to keep African cichlids. I love the way they look. It was really, some of my first projects working with animals, and so that's what you have in with the terrapin. Is there any issues between like the interactions between the fish and the turtle, like the terrapin? They're totally fine together.
Well, they are fine together. So that's the first negative feedback I ever got from posting videos and pictures and stuff. And this is when I just had an Instagram and I was posting I have another terrapin. She is outside and I got to get her a much bigger a horse trough. So I'm probably going to order it this week or next week. But yeah, little side topic. She's in like a 75-gallon horse trough, and she got so big. I ordered her from the guy. He said she was a male, so she's only supposed to be 4 or 5 inches. She's a female. She's like this big. So I'm looking into getting a 400-gallon horse trough. But as far as on Instagram, when I first started posting pictures and videos of my terrapin and cichlid setups, people were like, calling me names and stuff, saying, "Oh my gosh, that's so cruel. The cichlids they're gonna rip your terrapin's skin off." And in my head, I'm like, "What?" I was like, "If anything, it's gonna be the other way around." I'm like, a diamondback terrapin. I've seen them in the wild where I lived in Virginia. They live in brackish water with giant fish that can swallow them up in one gulp. I don't think an African cichlid's going to hurt the turtle, the terrapin. So yeah, for the most part, I've only had one incident but that was with the female. I'll tell you that in a second. But the male that I have inside, he's lived with African cichlids his entire life. He's never eaten one. They've never bitten him, and they're perfectly fine. And I don't know why. Like I always, just like you, I think African cichlids are just amazing. Like their colors are just phenomenal. So I was like, why not put one of my favorite turtles in a beautiful turtle and beautiful bright colored fish? I think it'd be awesome. And people were like, well, they're not from the same part of the world, and they're not
Yeah.
the terrapin's not from Africa or whatever. I was like, yeah, so my ancestors are from a totally different place, and I live here, So so I was like, I'm not gonna listen to anybody. I'm gonna give it a shot, and if they pick on each other, I'll watch them, and then I'll separate them. And that wasn't the case. The fish never attacked the turtle, but the reason that the terrapin female, I separated her from other turtles and fish. I had her just like this male. I had her in with some African cichlids for like 2 years, no issues. She was kind of small. She was a juvenile, and I want to say there was like 15 cichlids in there. And I went on a trip for a weekend, had automatic feeders in there. Those little things that feed your fish and turtles automatically. Came back and like half the fish were just torn up to shreds, and I was like, oh my gosh. And so then I was like, I'm taking her out. I took her out, moved her somewhere else, kept the fish by themselves. And then when I moved here, I put her in, she was living with some other turtles that I have. And then I noticed she was trying to eat them. And she actually took a chunk out of one of the turtle shells. So I put her by herself. And then now I put her in with another turtle that's her size, and they get along. They've been fine for a year so far. But she's just a monster,
Yeah, yeah. So with the cichlids, with the terrapin, was that something that you, like you said, you love them both, so it made sense for you to combine them? But had you come across anyone else doing that, or was it just like you were just going to try it, and then when you posted it online, people thought that it was like a crazy thing to do?
I think so when I wanted to get a terrapin, I started watching Dan the Turtle Man's channel all the time, and I want to say he didn't. I don't think he had African cichlids, but he would once in a while put fish in the ponds that he had, because he had like those Rubbermaid ponds. And no, I don't think I've seen, somebody probably has done it before me. I don't think I saw a video of somebody doing it, but yeah, I don't recall somebody else doing that. I was just like, I want to try it.
Yeah, I guess people get afraid with cichlids because they're like supposed to be aggressive, but I think the big thing is keeping them fed and making sure there's lots of space, and that they can get away from each other. And
Yep.
Like you said, turtles have pretty good defense mechanisms as far as getting into their shell, and they're hard and spiky, so hopefully they're fine.
I've lost more African cichlids to other African cichlids than I have that one incident with the turtle. Like, because it's like I'm not a big fish. I love fish. Like, I love having fish tanks. I always want to have at least one fish tank because I just like to relax and look at it. But it's just trial and error for me because I was like a rookie fish keeper. So I would go to the pet shop, get a couple cichlids, and then I wasn't thinking, because I'm like ignorant when it comes to fish. I did some research, but I would be like, oh, these ones look really cool. I'm just gonna go home and put them in, not thinking that the other ones are full grown. These ones are half their size, and I didn't have enough hiding spots for them. So now I always put a bunch of rocks in there, places so they can get away from each other. And this is a thing that I learned that was pretty interesting. It's recommended by a lot of cichlid keepers to keep almost overstock your tank.
Yeah.
So, because if you have say you have a 40-gallon tank that has like 6 cichlids in there or 5 cichlids, they're going to pick on one and they're just going to keep following that one around. But if you have so many, it's like their brains are like, oh, who's that? And they can't focus on any one fish. And that's worked out for me perfect since I learned that.
And if you look at real footage of Lake Malawi, for example, it does seem like just chaos. Like there's tons of fish on the bottom; they're all over the place. So I think that's sort of naturally how they're no wonder they're very defensive and aggressive because they're constantly in that state. And yeah, I remember when I kept cichlids, that was a pretty good rule of thumb to follow. Now you have a few other species of turtles as well. Like I said, you have some other ones that are outside. Is there any species that you think are species that are great candidates for people just having pets? And are there any that you keep that you're like, I love this turtle, but I wouldn't recommend it to somebody looking to keep a turtle?
I always would recommend a smaller species of turtle. So a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, you should never get a red-eared slider or something like that because they get relatively big. But I don't think I don't think they're necessarily bad pets. I just think people need to assume that this turtle is going to get huge. So I don't think anyone should get a turtle unless they plan on one day getting a giant fish tank or like a pork trough or a pond. But I would always I like to recommend smaller turtles just because most people don't plan on getting a 100-gallon fish tank. So I really like an underrated species in my opinion is the Mississippi map turtle. Mm. Especially if you could get I have two males, and I actually got two of them by accident. I ordered them from the Turtle Source. They're down here in Florida, and I didn't realize it was a buy one get one free sale for them. So I told my wife, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna get one Mississippi map turtle and then a bleach slider, and both as babies, and raise them up together, and then see what happens. And then I got the package, and then there's 3 turtles in it. I was like, oh man! And then she thought that I tricked her, but I didn't. But yeah, I would say Mississippi
you
map
gotta
turtles.
Get that on record.
Yeah. I would say Mississippi map turtles. I really like. They look super. You've seen them, right? They have like their eyes
really
are
cool patterns. Yeah,
cool patterns on their shell. Their eyes are bright white. They stay small. A lot of people say they're super skittish, which they can be. But when I kept them inside before I brought them outside, I had them in a fish tank, and then it's like you could work with it. They get used to you in front of the fish tank, and then eventually they eat from my hands and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a great one. For the most part, any turtle someone's interested in, I would always say if you could ensure you get a male, unless you plan on having a giant enclosure. Yeah, like male diamondback terrapins stay very small. Male spotted turtles in general are pretty small, but yeah, like I can't think of a turtle. I would say like I wouldn't recommend somebody to get a baby snapping turtle, which is kind of disappointing that they sell them so often down here, and like people go buy them on a whim, not thinking that this turtle could. I don't know how long they live. Probably, if I had to guess, 80 years. I don't know.
Yeah.
But people get them. Oh, they're cute. They're a little snapping turtle. And then 5 years later, they have a giant turtle, and they're like, "Oh, I don't want this thing. It's huge and it smells, and I don't want to keep it in my house anymore." And then they probably just go throw it in a pond. So yes. I would say I would not recommend a snapping turtle unless you're like super dedicated to having a giant snapping turtle enclosure.
Yeah, you need like a massive pond. I mean, they get enormous. I mean, I shared a picture of one on a couple episodes ago of one that was someone has been keeping track of a local one, that like a wild one, and in my area, and it's just huge. Like the size of its head's like a football almost. You just think, man, that thing's probably like 60 or years older, and yeah, that's quite a commitment. So I think that's some good advice. You mentioned you have a monitor as well. Can you tell us the species that you keep and your opinion on keeping? How's your experience been keeping it?
Yeah, so I always really I always loved monitor lizards, and I kind of I had my Frilled Dragon things going, and I wanted to build my. So that movie I told you about Frog, where he has that garage with all the enclosures, I wanted to have a reptile room that was kind of like that, but I wanted to have big spacious enclosures like you have, Yeah, your channel is part of the reason why, because originally when I set up my reptile shelf in here, I was like, oh, I have as many enclosures as I could fit on each shelf. And then I realized all the animals are growing, and I'm just like, why don't I just I have 3 big shelves. Why don't I have just 3 big long enclosures and get a species animal that has plenty of room on each shelf, keep that animal by itself or with another one. So yeah, I was just like, I kind of want a monitor. I don't want to get a huge monitor lizard, but I want like a medium sized one. And I spent like a few weeks looking into different types, and then I just started checking off I started Xing out the ones I didn't want, and then I came to the what is it called? I suck at like scientific words and stuff. Indicus complex, is that a thing?
I think that's a thing. Yeah.
Well, either way, it's like blue-tailed monitors, quince monitors, mangrove monitors, and peach throats. So that's one little group, and they're all relatively similar. So I looked into that, and then I really like the way the blue tails look. And then I saw that viral video of the guy who got bit by his blue tail monitor, and he was in the hospital. You had to have seen that, right?
I'm sure I have. It's not, for some reason, It's not coming back to my head. But was it a pretty bad bite? It
was bad, and I don't know what the guy was thinking or doing, but he's like kind of like really showing it. Like I don't like when that just makes monitors look like monsters. So that made me kind of afraid to get a blue tail. I was like, oh, and then I read on some forums that people were like, oh yeah, you can never chain down a blue tail. They'll be too aggressive. And then I really like the peach throats. I thought those were cool. I was thinking about mangroves. And then for some reason, I noticed that not a lot of people had quince monitors, but everybody who had them said that they don't really bite. They're more of a chilled monitor, and they don't get too big. And I love their bright yellow coloration. And
Yeah,
then I
they're
just kept,
beautiful looking. It's surprising that they're not more popular.
yep. That's how I started watching, what's his name? Dakota, his channel. Cause
Yeah.
he has some. And then I watched a couple other channels of people who did like unboxings and stuff. And then I looked up where in the world they're from and tried to figure out what I need for the enclosure. I wanted to start off in a small enclosure, just put some climbs and stuff, a lot of hides. Because when he got here, he was like so small. But yeah, that's why I went with the Quinn Monitor because they're medium sized monitor, not known to be aggressive, and I also like to get reptiles that not a lot of people have or know about. And I was like, oh, this will be a cool one to see how it goes, you know.
And is captive bred by someone in the U.S. or?
I got this one from Underground Reptiles, so
Okay.
I can't recall. Probably not. I think it's from I don't know what do they call them, like Reptile Farms or something. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
know.
Like it's
They
like a
do
farm
something.
bred. Yeah,
Yeah, something like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So did
So,
it come in okay though? Like is a baby, so essentially
well,
it's not necessarily a wild animal, but basically is born in. Its mother would have been wild, its father would have been wild. So it didn't come in full of parasites or anything.
well, yeah. This is the first. I think this is. I want to say this is the first time that I've ever gotten a non. I love, obviously I love I prefer captive bred over everything. But there's no way to get one in the United States at the time that was captive bred. I think only like two people ever have bred them here. But
Hmm.
yeah, so when I got it, a couple people messaged me, oh, have that monitor check for parasites. Keep it away from your other animals. I just got lucky. I did keep him away. I kept him in a different room for a while, and then I brought him back in the room. But I still, if I put my hand in his enclosure, I'd go wash my hands and then go do other things. But yeah, he was. I got lucky with that one. He was fine. I was a little sketched out, but you know how it is. If you really want a reptile, like my brain's like, you need this. This is the only way you can get it. You gotta. You might not be able to get one again. So I just like I gotta get it. You know.
Yeah, yeah. And how big will it get as a full grown adult? I assume it's not full grown yet.
No, he's not full grown yet. They supposedly they're very slow growers, but they say that the max they get 4.5 to 5 feet max. But I was talking to a couple people who have some adults, and they said that they know some I think I want to say the males. I think the males stay a little smaller, but they've seen full grown ones that are only like 3.5 feet long, and then they've seen ones that are like close to 5. But it's weird. There's a YouTube guy who had one years ago. I don't know if he has it anymore, but he shows the first year of his Quinn Monitor's life. It was the same size as mine, and then a year later, it was huge. He must have been overfeeding that monitor like crazy because it was. I've had this guy for 2.5, 3 years, and he's maybe almost 3 feet. And that guy's was like twice the width. His head was way bigger. So yeah, but normally it takes my friends who have them said it took like 3 to 4 years for them to even get close to full grown.
Yeah. Is it mostly insects you're feeding, or are you feeding a mix of things?
The Quinn Monitor?
Yeah.
Oh, he's never. I wish he liked insects.
Oh, they don't eat. They're not insectivores. Okay.
No, they can be, and a lot of them do eat them. When he was a baby, he loved crickets. I could never get him to eat a superworm. He would never eat a hornworm. And then once I started introducing things like quail eggs and like ground turkey or pinky mice and stuff, he won't even think about insects anymore. It's just this particular monitor. But yeah, a lot of other ones will eat a bunch of crickets and stuff like that. But yeah, I feed him fish, quail eggs. In the future, I'll probably feed him little quail. Yeah, frozen thawed mice, and sometimes I'll make like a little medley. I'll mix up some I'll like hard boil little quail eggs, put them in with some turkey meat. Put some calcium stuff in there and just mix it up. And even put some salmon in there and mix it up, and he just eats it like a dog, kind of.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, that's a cool animal. I mean, it's nice to have a monitor that's slightly more manageable in size, and it's not going to be something that you're going to have to give an entire room of your home to when it's full grown.
And eventually, I could keep him outside down here too.
Right.
Where he's from. I forgot the name of the island. It's a little island. A lot of those monitors are from those little island chains near Indonesia, but he's from one particular one, and the weather is just like the humidity is just like Florida, temperatures just like Florida. I just have to find out about the winter, but I can always do what Kenan does. I could get the heat boxes, And if it gets too cold, I could also bring them in for a couple days.
Yeah, yeah. Canon seems to get away with having just those heat boxes for pretty much all of the whole season.
Yeah, and where he lives, it's I want to say it's like an hour north of me, so it still will stay a little more warm down here than a couple more degrees. But yeah, he crushes it with his monitors. So yeah, I want to start using those heat boxes.
Did you have any issues with the hurricane, or is that a slightly different area?
I did not. I just got lucky. We just got a little wind and a couple little rainstorms, but nothing, no damage, no power outages. My sister lives in on the other side of the state in Tampa, and her house almost like water came right up to her house. People were canoeing up and down in the middle of the road the next day. But yeah,
Wow.
we were fine from that, and that's another thing that I got to start focusing on. I want to get like a bunch of little plastic totes and then write like Quinn's Monitor on there and get one for each one of my animals. So if we do have to leave real quick, I have a couple already, but I need like 10 more so I can just get them, put them in the car. And even if I don't leave, I can go in the car, turn the heat on if we lose power, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's definitely
For I have dart frogs or turn the AC on, you know?
yeah, it's definitely a area of the world where you need to have a good disaster plan. It's something that's quick, right? Like you only have a couple of maybe like a week notice of potentially something that could happen, right? So you got to just pack up quick and get the animals out of there.
Yeah, so far my plan has been I'm staying here with them no matter what. If they can't leave, I'm not leaving. So I've been hunkering down here. We have had a couple tropical storms, but so far we've been lucky. That's the plan now. But if like a Category 5 ever hits on our side, I'll have to leave and I'll have to bring all of the animals with me somewhere.
Yeah. And people always say that they'll say about the area that I live, how do you handle the winter? The winter's so cold, and it is cold, but there's very little risk of our house getting blown over, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like that would really, like having an earthquake scenario or having even a wildfire scenario or having a hurricane scenario are all three things that I never have to deal with here. And I feel like that's kind of a relief. But, and, you know, we do have 6 months of frozen solid, but that's the price we pay. But I feel like having even imagine packing up this type of stuff. I mean, you can't, right? You have to leave almost everything. You just take the animals and then go.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I would have to bring them maybe to my in-laws' house up north more. Hey, so what part of Canada do you live at?
I'm in Manitoba, which is basically like the dead center of the country,
Okay.
just north of Minnesota.
Okay. So when you like how did you how old were you when you got into reptiles and what got you into that?
I mean, I started keeping. I was a little bit later to keep. I was keeping maybe at around 15 years old. That's when I got my first crested gecko, but I had always been an animal person. Like my whole life, I loved animals, and I kept like that's before I was keeping fish and budgies and things like that. So I'd always kept like some specialty pets outside of the norm. But when I grew up in the country, so you're constantly surrounded by animals, just like mice and things that you find, and lots of frogs where I live. And we have a pretty huge population of garter snakes in the province. And so you would catch those through the summers and see them. And I don't even know what drew me to reptiles in general, but I was just an animal person. And eventually I think you go from fish and then you start looking at building terrariums, and that's where geckos came into the picture. And then I really just kept a single crested gecko for how long did I do that for? Probably almost like 8 years or so of just one crested gecko. And then I eventually decided to get another one. And then that's when the snowball started much later. So it was not like an immediate like explosion.
Yeah. Oh wow. That's pretty impressive that you were able to just keep one for that long. Because when I started again, I was like, I'll just get this. I'll just get the turtles. And then my brain's just like, you have room for this. You can get that. You could get this. And
Yeah.
and luckily I got to the mindset where it's not about having so many. It's about like what your channel is all about. The quality of enclosure you can give the animal. So like, because in the beginning I was just like had my childish mindset of I want to have all these cool animals, but now I want to have enough where it's not overwhelming for me to care for them, and I just have species that I love and enjoy, and it's not overkill. So I'm luckily I'm in the mindset of just upsizing the enclosures, downsizing the amount of animals I'm going to keep. So my game plan is to keep what I have now, breed Frilled Dragons, but not really get anything else.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to go. And for me, it was different because at that time, from like 2007 to 2015, whatever it was, when I only had one gecko, like I didn't know anybody who kept reptiles. I wasn't watching anything on TV, or YouTube was not really a thing, and there was obviously no TikTok, no Instagram, so there wasn't that pressure of seeing things that you might want. I was not exposed to the hobby at all. And now, like you said, you're coming back into it in the 2020s. It's just like you're just infiltrated by reptile content. As soon as you start looking it up, the algorithms start pumping it towards you. So I can imagine coming, especially then you have money as an adult and space as an adult, you can really get carried away quickly. So why don't we we'll wrap up kind of talking about we'd mentioned YouTube and Instagram and whatnot. I would love to hear, you had mentioned that you have the Friday, Saturday, Sundays off, and that's kind of your focus, is not only the animals but also the content you create. Do you have a goal with the content, or right now is it just focused on making content?
I would like to kind of not stray away. I'll still make like goofy, cheesy videos just because I think it's fun and easy to make, like little TikToks and stuff. But that's not really what I'm interested in. I'm interested in having a channel like yours where it's more kind of educational and exposing good ways that you can keep animals. And so my main goal, I'd say, is to make my long form YouTube videos like better quality. I'm still having since I kind of just started, I'm still like, it's hard for me to talk into a camera and act like I'm I'm not that excitable of a person. Like usually, how like a lot of the YouTubers like, hey, what's going on? And it's hard for me I can't fake that because I just can't do that. And I'm trying to figure out a way to sound more excitable, but also be realistic. And so I kind of just want to focus on my long form YouTube channel. Hope to have more, I want to have some build videos like the Spotted Turtle tank, but make the videos better quality. I want to practice filming them better and editing them better. Obviously, Surfer Design, he is the Michael Jordan of scaping videos. I want to get better at scaping, but I kind of want to be I want to do stuff like that. I want to make outdoor enclosure builds. I want to go out in the Everglades and film docu style content about alligators, about all the reptiles that live around here. So I've just been practicing all that, figuring out what works, what doesn't. And I got to get an editing computer because I've been doing all these editing on my phone, and it's just it's a nightmare, So editing a video on my phone, and then I have to transfer because I do have a Mac, a little old Mac from years ago. So I have to edit on my phone and then airdrop it to my computer, and then it I barely have enough room on there, so I keep having to delete things. So I got to get an editing computer. I just got a new camera. Got a new camera for the content. It's like a Sony ZV-E10 Mark II, just for the vlogging, and it actually takes better videos, in my opinion, of the animal. So I'll start incorporating that.
Oh, that's really cool. And you almost are reverse engineering it in a way, because you've had so much success with the short content that you have a huge audience already. And now, now that the shorts are a popular thing in the last 3 or 4 years, you can make a channel off of shorts, which I think is really cool as well. But then those skills of making a long form video, learning how to edit, buying the equipment, you're doing that after already having a huge audience. So that's I think is going to be cool, because you're going to be able to test your content instantly.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I got to tell you exactly what my mindset was. I forgot to add this in planning the channel. So my mindset when my wife told me to make a TikTok and stuff was I plan to breed. I want to be a captive breeder and sell frilled dragons, pretty much only sell frilled dragons, or maybe one other species in the future. So it's I'll just make a bunch of videos and get my name out there. So when it comes time to start selling animals, people will be oh, this guy sells frilled dragons. So I was I'll make some frilled dragon content. And then when I was on TikTok, I was oh my gosh, frilled dragons these are going to crush it on TikTok. And then I would find the viral songs, put them in the back of a frilled dragon. And I all the success I had on any of the platforms was not me. It was all the frilled dragons. They're the stars of the show, So and now it's like you said, it's I did everything in reverse. So now I can start learning how to make YouTube videos. I'm still a rookie at that,
Yeah. Well, that'll be cool, though. I think even moving the frilled dragons outside and kind of treating that as a video project, whether or not it works, I think just documenting that would be really cool, and maybe doing some of those outdoor builds. I think there's so many people that could use outdoor enclosures for so much of the year, even if I can do it, which I don't, but I could in my climate, then almost anybody could. You know, obviously we're not talking year-round enclosures, but could you do it for like July, August, that sort of thing? I think that sort of content there's more out there. There could be more out there. So if you do that, I think that would be really cool. And yeah, there's so much directions you can go, especially because the animals you keep are not necessarily the bearded dragons and the leopard geckos that everybody else is keeping. You can kind of have a different avenue to bring in new viewership.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's cool.
I wanted to ask you, like, what made you start wanting to make like YouTube content and stuff? Like, how did you get into that?
It was sort of a roundabout way. I mean, I started like Animals at Home initially started as a blog. Like I was writing because I was just trying to play around with basically looking for another thing to do. I had just finished my own swimming career, which took up a ton of time, like, you know, training 20, 25 hours a week. So that had finished, and I was coaching swimming already at that time, but I needed something else to do. Like I just had too much time on my hands. So I started this blog, typing out like some care guides and things, just, you know, random stuff that I don't even think is up there anymore. I probably removed it by now. And then I decided, I'll do a couple enclosure builds. And so I wrote articles on these enclosure builds, but then I recorded it at the same time as a kind of to accompany the article. And that's how YouTube started for me. And then I realized this was sort of at the tail end of like the pet tube era, where people were just blowing up for having, you know, 30 animals in their basement type thing. And I realized like I can't do that. I don't have the space and I don't have the money, and it didn't feel right to do that. And some people do that very successfully, and they do a great job keeping their animals. I have friends who have channels that are like that, and there's huge popular channels, and they do great, but I knew that wasn't going to be me. And so then the idea of the podcast just came to my head. I had listened to Reptile podcasts in the past, and there was a few that were that are still going now, like Morelia, Python Radio, and things like that. And I thought, I kind of want to do that myself, and I just did it. And then that allowed me to continue to create content that didn't involve me going to buy a new animal, doing the unboxing, doing the setup, that whole thing. And yeah, that was 6 years ago, and it's still going.
Yeah. One of the first videos, I think this might be the way I found your channel, is I got a Brazilian rainbow boa, or I was going to get one, and I was like, let me see some YouTube videos. And then I saw a cool video. I want to say that it was a while ago when I watched it. I want to say you were like, I don't know if you were rescaping the whole enclosure, but you were like making a naturalistic water feature for it.
Yeah.
And I was like, this channel is cool. And I subscribed, and I started watching like more of your stuff. And then I don't know if you had the podcast at that time, but then your podcast started popping up. I'm like, Reptile podcast. I didn't even know that was a thing. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. That thing is right there over my shoulder. You can see it.
Oh yeah, I see it.
Yeah. So at that time I was kind of doing both. That was during COVID, so I had more time to like do projects because I was doing nothing else. So I would do, you know, film some shorter videos and then also do the podcast. And now it's mostly just the podcast I do because that's really all I have time for. But yeah, I think it's a good way to consume content, and it's just, you know, it's connects the community a little bit better. So I've always enjoyed doing it, and I don't necessarily enjoy doing the build videos, those things. Like you said, Tanner's amazing at that, and I think that's something that you'll probably enjoy as well. But for me, I'm like, I just like to build. I don't want to be filming everything all the time.
Yeah, so I hear you. I hear you on that for sure.
Yeah. So the podcast is just a good way of allowing me to create and share content with people, and yeah, it's been awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that for sure, because like I do like making the build videos, but there's so many times where like I'm trying to concentrate on something specific with the build, and I have to keep filming using the camera. I'm like, oh my gosh, it'd be so much. So once in a while, I will do a build with no filming, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so much nicer just to do it that way.
Yeah, totally. Oh, that was another animal. I think you still have. I was going to ask you about is the Chinese water dragon. Do you still have one?
Yep. So any animal that I get, unless it's something I'm selling, that's something that I saw on YouTube is all those pet tubers. Oh, I'm going to go buy 20 turtles and this, and then you never see those turtles again. So one of the things I vowed to myself is I'm never going to get an animal and get rid of it in any way unless it dies, or if it's an offspring I'm selling. So yeah, I had it. That was a rescue situation. So that water dragon. Did you see the? I don't know if you saw the video of when I first got her. She was like skin and bones, man. Oh my God, it was bad. And my wife is like, my wife knew somebody who had it, and they knew I liked reptiles, and they weren't taking good care of it. And then I was like, yes, I'll take it, so it could be in a better situation. So that's going to be a fun build for that one's permanent build. I'm going to get the biggest exoterra you can get and fill up the closet, or I'm going to build one that fits in the whole closet and give it a nice big water feature. And yeah, but she's I still have her. She's doing good. She eats like a horse. And it's sad because every time I offer her food, it looks like she's never eaten before. She's like jumps across the thing, and I'm like, oh my God, you poor thing.
Does she spend a lot of time in the water?
Yep, a lot of time. I'm not as much as people think. Like, just because they're called, people would think, oh, water dragon's going to be in the water all the time. I would say like 25% of the time I come in here, she's in the water. The other time she's basking on the basking spots.
So what's interesting about that species? They look interesting. They're like a little mini iguana, but they're also so ubiquitous in pet stores. I mean, they come in wild caught by the thousands, I think, still, and they're quite often the pet that they're just like, you go to any PetSmart, you're going to see Chinese water dragons. It's just a random animal. I think it's just easy for them to be brought in, and probably not the best. So hopefully people start working with them on a captive breeding basis. But I think what happens is so many people end up with them, and there's no guidance for how to care for them properly. So I just feel like if you're going to just really start focusing on long form content, that'd be a perfect species, because there's probably so many people that buy it on an impulse and then they're going on Instagram or going on YouTube to look for like, well, how do you care for this thing? What is this? How do you, how should I set it up? And there's, maybe I have not looked, but there doesn't seem like there's much, because they just become like a churning pet. People just get them and they die, and they get them and they die. And a lot of times I think people will get them, they'll die, and then they're done with the hobby because they're like, I hate keeping lizards because they just die. But little do they know it came in with like, fungal disease, whatever it is. So I think that would be a really cool species to focus on.
Well, that is a good idea for a long video. I'm definitely going to make a long video like that. But it's funny you say that because I don't know if I was in middle school or high school, but that's one of the species. This is like a redeeming story for me. Like, I wanted to redeem myself. I was in high school, or I don't know how old I was. I wasn't old enough to drive, so I must have been 14 or 15 or something. So I rode my bike to the pet shop, saw some water dragons. I was like, oh, these things are awesome. What is this? It looks like an iguana. I love iguanas. But this, and then I read about it, so it eats like insects and stuff. So I was like, oh, let me get one. So I got, I want to say I got like a 20-gallon long, set it up, put a lot of climbs in there and stuff, a water bowl. And they just kept getting mouth rot. And I was like, what the hell? Why do they keep rubbing their face on the glass? And then I ended up trying to keep one, and it died. Another one died. And then I was just like, I'm never getting these things again. And then when I got the opportunity to take this one in as a rescue, I was like, I know why they were getting mouth rot, because they have glass surrounding them. So I was like, oh, take this one in, make a setup where it's minimal glass. So yeah, she had mouth rot when I got her. Now her mouth is healing up.
So is that just from them rubbing on the glass and creating an abscess and then it getting infected, basically?
Yeah, and sometimes so when I had them when I was like 14, in their mouth rot would cause their mouth sometimes it's almost scabbed shut, and then I'd have to pry it open. I could tell it was painful. I felt so bad, and then I'd have to hold them on their back and then force feed them the worms and stuff. And I was just like, that was just devastating. So it's nice to like, now that I can actually learn anything I want, get a book, watch some YouTube videos. So I'm like, I know this, because back then I didn't know it was mouth rot. I figured it out, rubbing on the glass. Because I would see them doing that, but I didn't put two and two together. I was just a dumb kid. They're just a species of, there's other lizards I have that are fine with glass and don't even think about it. Like Frilled Dragons, I've never seen them come up and like rub their nose on the glass. But if a water dragon in a fish tank with just walking around on the ground, they're going to just rub it because I think they can get through it all day long.
Yeah. I mean, you could probably make a video right now titled, why is my water dragon's mouth messed up? Because I think that happens. That's a similar story that I hear a lot of, especially with that species, because they're in every pet store. So yeah, that's really cool. Well, Tommy, I love the projects you're up to. I think you have a really cool array of species that will be easy to feature in videos, and like I said, you've already had this fairly engaging content that's attracted a huge audience. Is there anything you wanted to mention before we wrap up the show that we haven't covered today?
Yeah, I want to ask you. One or two questions.
Sure.
If you could have any reptile species that you don't have, like a dream bucket list animal, what would it be?
It's someone had just asked me this the other day, and I feel like I never have a good answer for it, but I always come back to Amazon tree boas. I don't know why, and it's like such a basic boa, and you could go get one at any reptile expo, but they're definitely a species that I'll have to keep at some point, because I for whatever reason, I love arboreal snakes, and Amazon tree boas I think are just so cool. Yeah,
they're pretty sick. Yeah. That's the only question I have, but I appreciate you having me. It was a good time, and I've been a fan of your channel for a while. So yeah, it's been a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on. And can you let everybody know where they can find your content online? That's all the platforms.
Yeah, on YouTube, just Tommy's Reptiles, and then I think I'm Tommy's Reptiles on TikTok and Instagram also, and those are the only places I really post content. So yep, just Tommy's Reptiles.
Awesome. Well, Tommy, thank you very much for being on the show. Of course, all that will be in the show notes as well. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
All right, that is the end of that episode. Tommy, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast and sharing your experience. Like I said at the beginning, I think frilled dragons are such a fascinating species for even non-reptile people that it's no surprise that it's drawn so much attention. I cannot wait to watch your channels develop and more of that long-form content. Hopefully you can get away from having to edit on your phone at some time soon and show some great videos. I think I have no doubt that your channel will continue to grow once you start doing those videos as well. Listeners, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. As always, it is greatly appreciated. If you're looking for more information on the show or the show notes, you can head to animalsathome.network.com. If you would like, you can join us over at Patreon at patreon.com/animalsathome. Every dollar that goes or that comes to me through Patreon goes towards supporting the show, whether it's my time, equipment, paying for editing, etc., etc. It really does help keep the lights on in this room. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you in the next one.